So, and that humidity makes the product, makes the sheet conductive. So it all works, but people who have a lot of inflammatory, hot burning pain, those kind of things, they like to lay directly on it because in 15 minutes their pain will disappear. With the sheet, if they have a lot of pain, some people just don't seem to get as much benefit. Once you're fairly healthy, then you can sleep with the sheet, no problem. It's not an issue. Did that answer that question?
You answered. Yeah, you answered all the questions that I'd asked. That's perfect. I'm going to throw one out to the audience. Marcus, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Yes, hi, Clint. This is Marcus from the Netherlands.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, in your work on grounding, did you ever come across a phenomenon which is called the hum, in which people all over the world, or at least people that are sensitive to it, seem to hear a low frequency noise or humming, and could grounding have a positive effect on this?
Well, the hum, you're talking about the hum of the earth. The earth is, first of all, it's spinning. I don't know. I don't know the tech anymore, but the earth is spinning, traveling around the sun, and you have the molten core of the earth, which is churning, and so there's a lot of activity going on the earth. It's like in your, an example would be like in your body. If you take a stethoscope and listen to your heart, listen to anything in your body, your muscles, everything, you can hear everything, and it's loud and it's very noisy. But for some reason, we don't hear it, in our daily lives. But it's with the earth. The earth is very noisy, and you have the waves hitting the beaches in a rhythmic pattern. You have the Schumann resonance, it's a very noisy thing. But yes, some people are much more sensitive, and they can sense these hums, let's say. And what I have learned over the years is, after all these 25 years of research, and the hum is really, to a lot of people, if they're very sensitive, what it is, they have exhausted adrenals. And I need to explain that when it's your sympathetic nervous system senses everything in the environment. It hears everything, and it's part of our fight or flight. If there's a noise, then your sympathetic nervous system is going to elevate a little cortisol and bring tense up the body a little bit. But we have a parasympathetic, which is designed to dampen the effect of the sympathetic, to create that few seconds that you can make a decision whether to run or to fight, the bear in the woods concept. But today we live in we're overstimulated. We live in a chronically elevated sympathetic state, and our adrenals become exhausted because the adrenals have a limited supply. But the parasympathetic is being chronically stimulated by the environment and noise and just life. And then, but as the parasympathetic only has a limited amount of resources, so it becomes exhausted. And you've heard the term exhausted adrenals. And so then the sympathetic becomes more predominant, and the more you can feel everything more. You feel, it's like people who are very sympathetic, overdrive, they can feel static electricity. They can touch things, and it's easy to be irritated by temperature changes, noise, anything, even colors on a TV set, they'll be sensitive to. So, but it has more to do with adrenal fatigue. And so the issue is more about restoring the adrenals and reducing anything in the environment that you can to reduce the stimulation, the chronic bear in the woods fight or flight stimulation that's going on just in life. You turn on a TV and there's drama and trauma and all this kind of stuff. Well, our body responds to all of that, or no matter what it is. Listen to good music, calms the mind. So it's just part of our world today. And, that's why I try to get people as much as possible. Just go outdoors, take your shoes off, put your feet on the earth and drain the inflammation, because that quiets the sympathetic nervous system and gives the adrenals a break so that the adrenals can begin to recover. They won't recover that quick, but you take the stress off of the sympathetic forever driving and forever pushing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, so this is an evidence-based, we like to consider ourselves evidence-based here. And you mentioned the 50 studies that you've done. Can you speak about the various studies that were touched on in the documentary? But if you could talk a little bit more about the type of research, has anything been done by third parties to verify this?
Yeah, most all of the studies were done by third parties. I mean, they were done by researchers at various universities or various professions. The only thing I ever did was ask the question, and because my background is electrical and different, so I didn't actually do the studies. I was involved in a couple of them, but primarily what I did was promote the studies. And I retired when I was about 50. I was fortunate that I had a pocket full of change and I could go out and encourage. Nobody does anything for free. So if you want research done, you have to pay for it. And so I was able to promote and in some cases fund these studies. But again, I had no direct influence or import on them. Most everybody was so skeptical they didn't even want to participate in it because they felt it might be embarrassing to associate with something as menial as barefoot, But anyhow, so the first study that I think is the most significant that was a bona fide study with IRBs and so on was the cortisol study. And cortisol is, again, it's related to your fight and flight. And anytime there's a stimulus in the environment, your body, it's like if somebody drops a glass, well, your cortisol is going to skyrocket because you're on guard. All of a sudden, you don't want to step on it or whatever. But anyhow, so we decided to to measure cortisol. What we did is, this was a doctor and down in San Diego. He was an anesthesiologist, and what he did was we would measure cortisol every 4 hours for 24 hours. So we had a circadian profile, and then we would freeze it and then send it to a lab, and then the lab would give you the results back. And then we went and redid this same test 6 to 8 weeks later with each subject. And what we saw, and all these studies are on the Earthing Institute .net, but what we saw was, before, everybody's cortisol profile was kind of like spaghetti all over the place. And after they had been grounded for 6 to 8 weeks, everybody's cortisol synchronized into a band. It would be high in the morning, then it would drop down to near zero at midnight, and then stay there. And at 4 a.m., then it would start skyrocketing. And the surprise was, what in the environment is causing or cueing the cortisol to become elevated at 4 a.m.? Because there's no light, there's no sound. And so anyhow, I did a bunch of work myself because of the communications industry. And we learned in the old days that telegraphs wouldn't work. Wouldn't start working. They would only work when there was sunlight or daylight. But a few hours before morning, then they would start working. And what it was is, as the earth turns and the sunlight starts to come, then it creates electrical eddies and so on. But so there is noise in the earth. The amplitude of the Earth's electric field begins to increase around 4 a.m. Very, very slight, but that's when cortisol. So that's coming from the Earth, and so that was one of the first things we learned. But anyhow, but that was an important study because everybody that, we were measuring sleep, do people sleep better, or and pain, and everybody, had a significant reduction of pain, and everybody had improved sleep, plus a plethora of other things that were anecdotally reported. And so that was the first study, and probably the most important study, because we recognized that it was the sympathetic nervous system and, cortisol, the fight or flight, your stress hormone, that's at play here. And and then the biggest trouble, or the challenge we had, is we defined with many different studies that pain goes away in 5 to 15 minutes. If you have hot burning pain in a wrist, you can put an electrode patch on it, connect it to the ground, and the pain's going to go away. And so we could validate that all day long, but the question was, what's the mechanism of action? What is actually causing that pain to go away? And it was in 2004, about 6 years after we started, that Ritger and the boys back at Boston, Mass. Came out with a study, on inflammation. It was the word inflammation. It was on, I think it was on Time magazine. There was showed the body on fire, and they had the word inflammation. And they said, the bottom line of the study was, you don't have all these health disorders that everybody, wears. What you have is chronic inflammation. And this inflammation causes, depending on your lifestyle and your environment and everything, your beliefs, all this stuff that goes on in our body, it can, if you have chronic inflammation, it'll manifest as cardiovascular disease in some people. It'll manifest as lupus or MS or arthritis or cancer or whatever. But all of these health disorders are because the immune system has become challenged and the body is on fire. And at that time, I looked at the article and I said, well, if inflammation is the cause of all these health disorders, and inflammation manifests as pain, then I said, we have the answer to all of these problems, because in nature, it's like animals who live in the wild. Cancer doesn't exist in the wild population. On the other hand, animals who live indoors with their owners, they all manifest health disorders, inflammation-related health disorders, similar to their owners. 50% of animals will die from cancer, just like their owners. And so, but in the wild, inflammation just doesn't manifest. So, but on the other hand, these animals are living grounded 24/7. Animals who live indoors are insulated from the earth. So it's an environmental health disorder. I mean, we changed our environment. We came from the earth. We lived on the earth. We eat the earth. We breathe, and then we've disconnected and we lost that electrical ground. It's like that's why we ground everything electrical to the earth, to maintain electrical stability and to prevent fire. Well, inflammation is fire. And so anyhow, we kept doing the studies. We did a lot of biofeedback studies and a lot of, but the most important study was done by Stephen Sinatra and Gaetan Chevalier. Stephen was a cardiologist and Gaetan is a physicist down in San Diego. But anyhow, what we did is we measured the electrical surface charge on red blood cells. And what we found is, after you ground somebody for 15, 20 minutes, that you increase the negative charge, the amount of free electrons on the surface of a red blood cell, by nearly 300%. And then what happens is, because of that, the red blood cells, they act more like negatively charged magnets. They'll repel each other. You can't push them together. And then that thins the blood, or normalizes the blood viscosity. And then the blood can get in and out of the capillaries easier. And in the process, it can oxygenate the tissue and clean up the debris and so on. But it was so part of it was circulation and but improving circulation. But the fact that when you ground the body, that the blood itself equalizes with the earth. The little red blood cells become negative, just like the earth itself. So there's a, and when you lose that, then what happens is as you breathe and as you do what you do, metabolism, you start giving up electrons. You start losing this negative charge. And then, and this is all part of these studies, but then what happens is, it finally came down one day that I was reading some papers on neutrophils and how the immune system works, how white blood cells, how they work. And so what happens generally, if you have a pathogen or, something in your body, a damaged cell that needs to be removed, which goes on all day, every day, the immune system will send a neutrophil, and neutrophil will swim over to where the pathogen is. And it's kind of a jelly type cell, and it'll just wrap itself around the pathogen. So it's fully encased, and then it will release what we call reactive oxygen species. Reactive means it's an electrical word. I mean, it's electrically charged, and it has enough energy that it can strip an electron away from a pathogen. And that's how the immune system destroys pathogens. And so that all makes sense. It's called the oxidative burst. It goes on all day long in your body. And, but anyhow, so using some cowboy logic, because I grew up on a ranch, and, but anyhow, so it just dawned on me that, well, if we're reducing inflammation when we ground somebody, then what's happening is we're absorbing electrons from the earth because the body is short of electrons because we're wearing shoes. So it was just kind of a cowboy, add this, subtract that, and you end up with this concept. Well, it's like pouring water on a fire. I mean, oxidation, whether it's a fire or whether your body's burning, it's all the same. And so anyhow, we were able to determine that it was loss of free electrons, because every time we would ground a human, then within 15 minutes, the pain would resolve. This is grounding them with patches, electrode patches. We put it on the palm of their hand or wherever they had an issue. And within a few minutes, then the pain would resolve, and we could actually see it with thermal imaging. So we did quite a few thermal imaging type studies, so you can see inflammation before, and you can actually see it decrease in just 15 to 30 minutes. And then we measured, one of the main studies we did was up at the University of Oregon with Dick Brown. He trained Olympian runners, and so the biggest challenge they have is delayed onset muscle soreness. That means after you go work out or whatever, then you create a lot of inflammation in your body as you're building up muscle, and then sometimes, like 2 or 3 days later, it's challenging to even walk because you have so much inflammation in your body. So what we did is we grounded, I think they're 21-year-old students, male students, and we had them, do 2 or 3 sets of exercises that would inflame the calves or burn the calves, and then we had them sleep in a controlled room for, I think it was 7 days, and we measured their blood every day. They did an MRI, so they could measure everything that went on in the body. And as an end result, the people who weren't grounded in the study, they had normal delayed onset muscle soreness, meaning that they were stiff and sore, and 3 days later, they're hobbling around. But the subjects who were grounded, they had significantly less delayed onset muscle soreness, but most of all, their bilirubin and things like that maintained constant. Where so they had just less inflammation, and so it's just, we were just confirming in all of our studies. We weren't trying to say do this to reduce delayed onset muscle soreness. We were doing it just so we could see that the only way we could induce inflammation in a human body was through physical exercise. So, but anyhow, by doing that, creating the inflammation in these younger gentlemen, then you could see all of the biological, activity and the changes. And so what we were able to do was to just show that inflammation does not manifest in a grounded body. And then if you do have inflammation, you put your feet on the earth and the inflammation will drain away. And you can see that with thermal imaging and the, the physical reporting and so on. So anyhow, it's, that's what we did.